y'all. I'm Dan Hamilton, Marine Corps veteran and host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board. Here on the Next Gen Warrior Show, we are proud to promote the success stories and the achievements of veterans after they take off the uniform, as well as discussing the programs and resources that got them to where they are after their military service. Joining me today is Hernán Prado. He is a United States Navy veteran serving for 15 years as a hospital corpsman and then as a surface warfare officer. He is also joining me from San Diego. He is the founder and the CEO of Workshops for Warriors. H, it's great to have you on the program today. How are you?
Great, Dan. Thanks again for having me on.
Absolutely. So before we get into your military transition and kind of what struck you, the light bulb moment, I guess, for starting Workshops for Warriors, tell us a little bit about your military service.
So I'm a 15-year Navy veteran. I did combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. I was enlisted, then I became an officer, and I love the Navy. I would have stayed in there forever. And the only reason I left was because, coming back from Iraq, I saw these competent, capable, and honorable men and women just struggle to find any type of niche in the civilian world, and they just kept struggling. And I kept thinking, like, what do I do? What do I do? How do I help my comrades in arms back in the U.S.? And I guess I didn't know how, but it really dropped me to my knees when one of my Marines actually lost both of his legs in Iraq. And I turned to my wife and said, we're going to do something. And we sold everything. We sold our house, sold our cars, cashed out our savings and retirement plans, and started Workshops for Warriors.
So from my understanding, you guys are based just outside the San Diego airport and not too far from the San Diego airport. I guess the Marines listening to the show will know kind of that general area. If you're from Camp Pendleton, you did boot camp there. But when you first started Workshops for Warriors, when you started at the ground level, tell me about the difference. Tell me about the growth from where this started to where it is now.
Absolutely. So to give you an idea, or for those of your viewers and listeners that don't know about Workshops for Warriors is the only nonprofit school in America that's accredited. And what we do is we provide accelerated manufacturing training, nationally recognized credentials, and we place veterans and transitioning service members into advanced manufacturing careers in welding, machining, robotics, computer-aided design, machinery repair, and 3D printing throughout the nation. So we started off in a 400 square foot garage in my house in McLean, Virginia. And we've grown 350 times our square footage in the last 14 years as a result of the generosity of our donors and the individual philanthropists that have helped us grow. We've gone from 0 students to almost 1,000 graduates that have been placed in full-time jobs in companies like Boeing, SpaceX, Tesla, Reliance Steel and Aluminum, Ford Motor Company, with $60,000 a year average starting salaries after just 16 weeks of accelerated manufacturing training at our school.
It's an incredible growth rate. It's also an incredible industry. What kind of led you? And I know you have some engineering in your background as well as as your military service, but the manufacturing industry is not something that I guess you could say a layperson can just pick up, right? It's not something that you turn around and go, I'm going to start a manufacturing school. I'm going to get people. This is a very highly trained, very precise. It's also a very diverse industry. You mentioned everything from 3D printing to robotics to welding to all of this, right? So with that kind of context, understanding how large the manufacturing industry can be, how does somebody like yourself who wasn't a manufacturing CEO, you hadn't been working in the industry for 3 or 4 decades, how did you build something while coming at it from an outsider's perspective?
So with help is the short answer.
There you go. Yeah, that's the key. That's the key to everything, I guess. Huh?
And my wife always says, there's some things that you do better than I can do, and there's some things I can do better than you can do. And in the military, we say, one team, one fight. That, we tease the Army, but there's a need, right? And, every service does what they need to move our nation forward and to help protect our nation. And that's what DoD's job, right? Is warheads on foreheads, and all the different services go, and they help complement the different mission. And even though we tease our sister services, we are a united front. We're one team, one fight, right? And when we came back to the US, I think the biggest challenge that I had was I didn't know what to do. But my wife is a survey methodologist and a statistician, the prettiest nerd you'll ever meet. And when we were trying to figure out, at the time I was working in Washington, D.C. at the Naval Observatory, what I was noticing is that my Marines were coming back and they were stationed at National Naval Medical Center, which is now Walter Reed. But they were struggling and they didn't know what they wanted to do. And for my officer friends, it was easy. They knew what they were going to do. They had a degree, easy. But for my enlisted friends, it was very tough. And what I noticed is that they'd come over to my house and they'd start tinkering with a drill press or a welder or whatever it is. And in true Marine Corps fashion, they'd be like, "Doc, bring me this. Doc, bring me that." So before I knew it, I had what one of my mentors called a VFW with power tools at my house. And I was speaking with my wife and said, "Hey, this is good, but guys might get injured and there's no clear path forward for them other than just tinkering." So I thought, they love doing something with their hands. What's the industry that is most in demand? And then it hit us. It was the perfect storm for us. America desperately needed manufacturing. So to give you an idea, there are 720,000 unfilled jobs in manufacturing due to lack of skilled labor. That number will triple by 2030. And the average age of a manufacturing employee today is 59 years old.
Wow.
So in 10 years, who's going to build our ships, our aircraft, our AR-15s, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And our future. So I thought, here's this like the wall of doom coming towards us in terms of manufacturing. On this other side, I call it the silver tsunami, right? The 59-year-old average age, right? So all of a sudden you have these two conflicting events, and I thought, hey, the Marine Corps is the only service in the history of humanity that runs towards the fight, right?
That's right.
So I thought the Marine Corps tenet, and it was built to be most ready when the nation is least ready. And my goal is to build workshops for warriors for when the nation is least ready. So my goal is, how do I give my friends that served an opportunity to have a lifelong dignified career and give America the workforce that she needs? So we thought, all right, what we need to do is provide compressed accelerated training, like an MOS granting school.
Sure. That
leads to nationally recognized credentials that provide an average starting salary of $60,000 a year. Because you can be, a farmer in Arkansas, you're 18 years old, and you go join the Marine Corps, and in a couple of years, you're making $60,000 to $80,000 a year, right? In the Marine Corps. So it's hard to go from having all this economic inertia in the Marine Corps and making, $60,000 a year, having basic allowance for housing, having medical insurance, to all of a sudden being ripped out of America's suit of armor and trying to figure, you're in free fall trying to figure out what to do. So it sounds easier now, but in short, there was a pressing need. I wanted to give the people that I served with, the Marines that I served with, a clear, dignified path forward, and America needed a manufacturing force.
Let me turn the conversation a little towards your personal growth and kind of your growth as a founder and a CEO. There's a big difference, I think, when we have had guests on our show from the idea phase or the concept phase to growing a business. And when you are the CEO, especially if you're running a small business or if you're running a nonprofit like yourself, you're building the ship almost as you fly it. Can you talk about maybe some of those hurdles and what you learned, maybe just about yourself and how you lead while you're building something that you're trying to bring other people to buy into and also service a huge need, not just for the veterans community, but the nation at large?
Great question. I actually started two companies because I needed more money for workshops for warriors. So I started another company with a bunch of my friends from the Navy and Marine Corps to bring in more money for workshops while I was waiting for people to donate money to grow workshops. So I started 2 companies at the same time, or within a year.
You really don't
And
like free time, do you? You don't like downtime, huh?
No, I think my daughters would tell you that too. I don't spend a lot of time at home, but I feel very fortunate to come back alive from my combat tours, and that's a lot more than a lot of my friends can say. So I am pretty driven relentlessly by the idea of my friends that are no longer with us, and the idea that I owe it to them and to their survivors and dependents to find a dignified way forward for them. And I don't want their loss to be in vain. So I don't sleep that much. I do work a lot, but I do think it's for a better purpose.
Yeah. And sorry to cut you off there, but I think that's I want to touch on that for a minute for our audience, because another theme that comes up on the show often is post-traumatic growth. And what I would want veterans to hear, those who are on active duty here, I think especially from your story, is that veterans who leave the service, who either gone through combat, who have lost friends, that there are healthy outlets to use that grief. And I think that is essentially what you are getting at there, if I'm correct, about finding ways to honor your buddy's sacrifice and using it almost as a healthy driver for you to continue to serve your community.
Dan, I'm so happy that you brought that up. We have classes that start every 4 months at Workshops for Warriors. Classes are 5 days a week, 9 hours a day, 16 weeks long. And every time that we start a class, I talk to the students and I tell them, we were all in the service here, and we literally have every service except for the Space Force. I don't think it's old enough yet to produce its first transitioning member, right? But
maybe the next one will come from hearing this conversation.
But we have every service represented, and I get everyone together and I say, hey, has anyone here ever met each other before? Maybe a smattering of hands, but we've got about 110 people here a day, every day going through training. And I will share with them, look, if one of you guys got shot, everyone else would dive in to help this one person that no one knows, because we're trained to deal with that trauma, that physical trauma. And mental trauma, mental distress, mental health is as important to us as physical distress or trauma. We just can't recognize it well enough. So we have to recognize what those signs are and help people. And the easiest thing for us is we're the new tribe, right? Workshop Warriors is the new tribe for the people that are coming out there. If you're out there and alone, you're not alone. Just because you haven't found your new tribe yet doesn't mean you're not alone, right? We're here for you. Reach out to your friends, reach out to the people that you served with, go to a VFW, go to a DAV event, go to some organization that has other veterans and connect, find your new tribe, because you are not alone, and what's happening to you is happening to other people, right?
No, it's an incredible, remark that you said. Is just because you haven't found a tribe doesn't mean there's not one out there. And I appreciate the work that you are doing to help these veterans find their tribe. I want to pivot a little bit back to Workshops for Warriors and talk about what veterans can expect if somebody is out there and they're looking for a job, or they're interested in getting involved with machining, or they're just interested in welding. How can they apply, and what should they expect kind of getting involved with Workshops for Warriors?
So first of all, if you're interested in getting some life-changing training, nationally recognized credentials, and placement in companies like SpaceX, Tesla, Facebook, Google, Reliance Steel and Aluminum, Ford Motor Company, I would encourage you to go to wfw.org. That's Workshops for Warriors, wfw.org, or call us at 619-550-1620. We have classes that start every 4 months, and we teach machining, welding, fabrication, machinery repair, 3D printing, robotics. Courses are 4 months long. We'd love to have you in our school. We've been growing every semester since I started the school in 2008. Every semester we get bigger. We are in the midst of doing a $15 million expansion that kicks off in November that will enable us to triple the amount of graduates we can train per year and make us self-sustaining. So if you're out there and you know someone that has a corporate philanthropy foundation or a corporate responsibility group, or you're an old aunt or uncle that has a ton of money that they want to give it to someone, we're here. wfw.org. Please send us money.
We'll send them to you.
87% of money. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We'll send them to you, I said.
The 87% of all money goes straight to the training program, and we average $60,000 a year starting salaries for graduates of our program. So if you're out there, call, and we'll see what we can do to get you into one of our classes as soon as possible.
No, I really love it. And, I can't help but think back kind of what you were talking about just a moment ago about, you had the tools set up in your kind of in your shop or in your garage. And now it's become this incredible organization that is training veterans. It's giving them a tribe, as you say, it's giving them a purpose. I wanted to go back, though, and revisit maybe some of the biggest lessons you've learned as CEO in the last couple of months, because as I said and alluded to earlier, your job changes quite a bit as the organization grows. You have to take on different responsibilities, whether that's sitting down doing interviews and being kind of a spokesperson for the industry at large, or for workshops for warriors, or even going out and looking at land where you want to have your organization be in marketing. You have your hands in so many different things besides just the training for these veterans. So can you talk about maybe what you have learned on the job, and also what kind of your day-to-day is?
All right. Well, there's a couple of different questions. Let's start off with what I wish I had told myself, 14 years ago, or whoever else is starting, is that things take a lot longer than you'd ever expect. Let's start off with that. It always takes longer. And when you're looking at it in the rearview mirror, it always seems easier and it always went faster. But when you're doing it, it's a long, hard slog, and the progress is imperceptible. But once you get to a certain point, you look back and you really realize how much you've achieved. So one of the things that the Marine Corps really taught me, and the DoD teaches everyone, is be relentless. Be relentlessly relentless, and be positive while you're being relentless. So that would be the number one thing. Is attitude is absolutely everything. You got to move forward and keep moving forward. The other thing is, for me, I was kind of driven by what I saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. And for me, it was easier than most, I would say, because I'm married and I've got 2 daughters. So they are constantly telling me how wrong I am and how I need to fix things. So for me, my ego is much, much lower than my desire to see workshops for warriors succeed. And I would much rather be wrong and have the organization be right than the opposite. So one of the key things that I learned from one of my mentors, who's Dick Eager, is that he'd say all the time, I'd rather have us be right. I'd rather find the right solution than have the right solution. And it's more important to do the right thing than to be credited with doing the right thing. And I always found that to be very, very powerful. And then the last thing that I picked from being a philosophy student earlier is using Hanlon's razor, right? It's one of those philosophical tenets that says, don't attribute any type of meaning to an event that's outside of you. So if someone's scowling, or they have a resting face, if you will, don't think, oh, they're probably angry at me, or don't attribute anything to what their actions are, what their verbs are, anything coming out of their mouth, because you don't know what kind of day they had. You know why they're saying certain things. So, and they're probably not even thinking about you. So just look at things and don't take whatever's told to you in the most positive, most constructive light, because odds are you probably misunderstood it, or it wasn't meant that way. And humans are terrible communicators. And most of the time you think, if you doubt me, like I have my conversations with my daughters and my wife every day, and I'll say one thing and they'll say the exact opposite. And it's like watching Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, no, don't press that button. And they're like, oh, press the button. I'm like, no, do not do that. And like, do that. No, wait. And over again, right? So just keep that in mind. What you think you're communicating might not be what was actually being received.
Before we jumped on and had started our conversation here, we were kind of just discussing, I guess, the malaise, right, in our communities or across the nation. And I think there's something that you alluded to about maybe the passion that you have is kind of shaking, whether it's the veterans community or your local community or the American community at large, to get engaged with the people around them. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So people love veterans, right? America is a very patriotic company. Everyone loves veterans. However, loving a veteran does not give them the skill sets or the training or the credentials that they need to give employers the employees that they need. So America loves veterans. Employers need welders, machinists, fabricators, machinery repair technicians, computer designers. And that costs money. And for example, President Biden has this new infrastructure bill that is, very well intentioned. It's desperately needed to reinvigorate American manufacturing, but it's based on this incorrect assumption that there's this pool of talent available to fill these jobs. It's not in there, right? It's not there at all. We have to build it. So the cornerstone for President Biden's plan is this nationally scalable plan or program like Workshops for Warriors to rebuild American manufacturing. And you have veterans that have honorably served, that are competent, capable, mission-focused, team-oriented, that are looking forward to serve in a different capacity outside of uniform. All they need is training to become part of America's workforce, to help rebuild American manufacturing. And they can only do that with funding. And if you've ever served, right, we always say vision without funding is hallucination. Right? So President Biden's infrastructure bill has zero allocated for manufacturing training. So that means that someone somewhere has to create this pool of talent that lead to nationally recognized credentials that can then be used throughout the United States. And that's where Workshops for Warriors comes in. And if there's another school out there, I'd love to hear about it, but I haven't found it in my 14 years of doing this. So we are training just veterans as well as active duty transitioning men and women. So what I would encourage is people on the show to say, hey, I'll help, I'll donate. A scholarship to go through Workshops for Warriors is $25,000 and it leads to a $60,000 a year job after 4 months of training. You find me a better ROI in America and I'll invest in it because I need that money to help grow Workshops for Warriors, right? So you find me a better program, I'm all in. I'd say, how do you get Americans to kind of engage, right? As a naval officer, as a Marine, we know that it's in our nature to serve, to be of service. How do we get our fellow Americans to say, you know what? I'm a big fan of speaking English. I like having clean water. I like being able to drive on a road that's paved every day. I like being able to call the police and have someone come and help me, right? That's what we do. We serve to create that atmosphere, that environment that is conducive to public learning, to the betterment of our society. How do we get people engaged?
I certainly think about that a lot because the one thing that I certainly remembered during my military service and prior to that, because I think I was maybe ninth grade when 9/11 happened. I joined in 2005, so there were a good 3 or 4 years in there where you saw the yellow bumper stickers, right, that said support our troops. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw those where you were and where you grew up, but across Texas and across the Houston area, those were ubiquitous. They were almost on everybody's car. And I keep I tell the veterans community, I tell especially the 1 degree outside of veterans that, hey, that was really well intentioned, that support the troops sticker, but what can we do tangibly to actually support the troops? And I think what you're doing is the actual embodiment of that little yellow ribbon.
I appreciate that. I didn't see that bumper sticker because on 9/11 I was in New York City and I was pulling people. Yeah. So I'd gone in there to pull my wife out of 300 Park Avenue where I just dropped her off. I'd just come back to my honeymoon from my Navy unit. I was on a little patrol coastal that was stationed right outside of New York City.
Wow.
And I couldn't board my ship because of 9/11. So I stayed there for 2 weeks to help with efforts, and we were on ground zero. And then immediately after that, I went to Iraq. So no bumper stickers for me for a while.
No, you didn't. Well, let me ask you then. I know if you don't mind, we've been as we've celebrated, I guess, not celebrated, but as we've remembered and also celebrated the lives that were lost on 9/11. Obviously, your experience was much different than mine, you being down there and then deploying very shortly afterwards. If you don't mind sharing maybe some of the conversations that you've had with your brothers and sisters in arms. I know that I've had quite a few conversations with friends of mine that I served with in Afghanistan, just calling them up and trying to encourage them and say, hey, you know, the one thing that I have tried to hammer home with veterans and people in my, you know, small community is saying, hey, your service mattered. You served the people to the left and the right of you, regardless of the last month or so. Your service has value. And then the second thing is, you know, going back to the little bumper stickers and continuing to serve. Go find somewhere else to serve. Your service doesn't have to end after you left Afghanistan. Find a way to get plugged in. But I know that's kind of a lot to chew on there, but I kind of am interested to know kind of your thoughts and reflections as well as the conversations that you've had.
On one hand, thank you, first of all, because that's, you know, it's part of this being a new tribe, right? I think I've shared with you before that when you're in the service, you are America's chain suit of armor, right? You are this chainmail suit of armor, and every day you know who you report to, what your mission is, what your peers demand of you, what your subordinates expect from you, what you have to provide for your superiors. And then when you leave the service, you're kind of ripped out of America's chainmail suit and kind of cast asunder. And I don't say this in a bad way, just, you know, it doesn't matter if you join the service, you're going to leave at some point in time, you know, either on your back or on your feet, but you're going to get out. And, you know, there has to be that transition, and it's very unsettling. And I think part of that free fall, emotionally, professionally, spiritually, is that loss of who you were and kind of adjusting to who you want to be next. And part of that is finding a new tribe, which we mentioned earlier, and finding a new way to serve. And it's easy now to look back at Afghanistan and Iraq and say, oh, we, you know, woulda, shoulda, coulda, but it doesn't matter. At that time, we went in there for whatever reasons, and I think every person that served can be happy by thinking, I did the best possible service that I could have done, and I served in the best way possible, and I followed my legally or executed orders, I followed my lawful orders, and I helped my brothers and sisters in arms, and I helped move our nation forward, and I fought for the United States of America, which is the only nation in the history of humanity that is beholden not to a bloodline or a monarchy, but or a religion, but to the idea of the United States Constitution. And that's what we served, and you can be proud in that service.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you reflecting on that, as well as, you know, discussing that with our audience, because I think it's good to hear. And I think it's something veterans need to continue to hear as we go forward. You know, one of the other things that I would like to ask you before we begin to close it out is what you do to stay sharp. What do you do to stay motivated? I know you alluded to that a lot of your motivation and your passion for serving is about those that you either served with or lost while you were serving, but more so maybe on the day-to-day, what you do to stay sharp.
So let me start off by saying it's not me at all. I'm very, very fortunate to live and work with some of my best friends. I literally work with people that I served with. I work with some of my best friends. I work with people that are incredibly capable, committed, intelligent, motivated, and it's a pleasure to come to work every day. And I'd say my takeaway is civilian life is not like the military. It's very, very hard to wake up every day, PT every day, physical, you know, exercise for those of you that aren't in the military. It's very hard to, you know, it's hard to have that picture perfect, you know, Vogue or Cosmopolitan or Men's Health type look, you know, life where you wake up at a certain time, you eat your acai bowl, you know, looking out into the sunrise and having your perfect cup of coffee. You know, you're not. You're gonna fail. Every day you're gonna fail at something, and every day you're gonna succeed at something. And I think you have to kind of be generous with yourself, have an emotional system of support, and know that you're not going to be that person you were in service, right? Because DoD funds you to be in great shape and be competent at what you're doing, which is in some way, shape, or form helping to put warheads on foreheads or pulling a trigger or doing something to advance our national interests. When you get out, you eat what you kill.
Yep.
It's a whole different animal. So you're going to gain some weight. You're not going to be able to have breakfast at 0600 because when you're in the military, right? If your kids need to go to school, you ask your spouse to help take them to school because, you know, you can't be late. When you're no longer in service, then You show up to work late, things happen, you aren't able to work out when you wanted to, dinner takes longer, and you end up getting frustrated at this idea that you're not living that perfect life that you imagined yourself to be living when you're a civilian. So it's very important to find an emotional network. And like for me, one of my best friends lives, and we work right next to me, and it's working out every morning. That really helps to get your stress down, and finding a de-stressing activity that is constructive, right? Not Tito's, not Jack Daniels. Find a constructive, de-stressing activity, and ideally one that either helps yourself, helps your community, helps your kids. Go running with your kids, take up a hobby, invent, build something, and give yourself a little bit more slack than you would normally, because you're not that person that you were in uniform. You got to kind of refocus that lens.
No, that's really great advice, and I appreciate you talking about that as well as saying, hey, you're going to have some wins, you're going to have some losses, but keep moving in the right direction. And we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked really about the needs of the manufacturing industry, the great work that y'all are doing there out of San Diego to help fill that gap. And I also appreciate you reflecting on your military service and what motivates you. But is there anything maybe today that we didn't get to hit on that you would like to leave our audience with?
Yes. What I'd like to share with you is, I think the most common misperception that I see is this idea that America has the people that it needs to move forward. We're just not doing it for some reason, for some unknown reason, we're not doing it. And I think to help people understand, we're going to have 2.1 million unfilled jobs due to lack of skilled labor. To build one of our schools here to produce about 2,700 people per year is about $148 million. So to create this system of schools would require 770 schools, and it would take 10 years for these schools to create the workforce that America needs right now. So this is a huge issue that we need to take on as Americans, but we need to realize this issue first, because Americans are great at galvanizing together against a common visible threat. This is an invisible threat. But for example, in the military, we don't like to lose. We don't like to be number two. And guess what, America? We're number two in manufacturing in the world. Number two. And if you don't like the sound of that, get off your butt. Do something. Donate to Workshops for Warriors, right? Let's get veterans trained up to be the vanguard for America's manufacturing force. Let's rebuild American manufacturing, because with a strong manufacturing base, we innovate. We build a stronger economy. Right now, America is at risk economically, socially, and militarily, and we have it within our power to take it back. So I'd say, join Workshops for Warriors in rebuilding American manufacturing. Join us. Go to wfw.org and help.
H, I think that is a great place to leave it. Thank you so much again for, first of all, for your military service. And I think on behalf of all Marines, we love our corpsmen. So thank you for your service as a corpsman and your dedication, as well as taking off the uniform, founding Workshops for Warriors, and creating a pipeline where veterans can find a new tribe, gain a skill, and have, as you notified or as you signaled there, a dignified job and a dignified career field. Thank you so much for starting this. Thank you for coming on the program and talking about such a great organization. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Semper Fi, Dan. Thank you.
Semper Fi, H. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff here on the Next Gen Warrior Show, we are so thankful to have an incredible audience, and we want you to continue to help share the programs and resources like Workshops for Warriors here in the great state of Texas and around the nation, so that we can help veterans transition healthfully and get into meaningful careers after they take off the uniform. Until next time, my name is Dan Hamilton. We'll see you next week.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.